Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for attending today's webinar. We are very excited to present our state scorecard at this critical juncture of energy transition. I am Edward Yim, State and Utility Policy Director at ACEEE, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Before we begin, let me just provide a few quick housekeeping announcements. We are recording this webinar and we'll be making it available to all registrants within a few business days. We will also be making the slides available. To ask a question during the webinar, please add it to the Q&A feature on the bottom bar. We will be taking questions at the end of the webinar. So please hold your questions until the end, or at least know that we will be looking for your questions in the Q&A, and then we will set them up for answers. You can upvote questions that you think are particularly good or that you think we should prioritize. And you are obviously free to network with other attendees in the chat. So we present this webinar at a time of significant change that's happening and at a time when even more changes are needed to happen quickly. There is the ongoing war in Ukraine, which, among other things, has clearly reminded us of the importance of energy conservation and affordability. And we all have really celebrated the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, which will accelerate energy decarbonization and increase the funding for energy efficiency. And we will hear about today the great policies and programs that many states have successfully implemented to increase energy efficiency. However, there is so much more that needs to be done. The International Energy Agency in its 2022 report has emphasized that we should probably triple the amount of annual energy efficiency spending to meet the 1.5-degree goal over the next 10 years. And the atmospheric concentration of carbon continues to go up each year. So now more than ever, we need to decarbonize our end uses quickly. We need to keep energy affordable, and we need policies that center equity. The speakers that you're about to hear from will show how we can do just that. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker, my colleague Sagarika Subramanian. Sagarika is a senior research analyst with the State Policy Program at ACEEE and the lead author of the 2022 State Energy Efficiency Scorecard. She joined ACEEE in 2021. Prior to joining ACEEE, she worked at UCLA as a research assistant and most recently as an intern at the Alliance to Save Energy, contributing to energy efficiency projects for the Research and Strategic Initiatives team. She holds a Master of Environmental Management from the Yale School of the Environment and a bachelor's degree in Environmental Science from UCLA. Sagarika, take it away.
Thanks, Edward. And I will just share my slides momentarily. Okay. Is everyone able to see that? Perfect. All right. Well, thanks, Edward, and thank you very much to our panel of speakers and attendees for joining us today. I'm very excited for the conversation. So I want to give some background on the state scorecard to those who are new. ACEEE has published the State Energy Efficiency Scorecard since 2007, and it's evolved over the years, but it has always been intended as a means to document and compare state efforts to advance energy efficiency across multiple end-use sectors. The state scorecard is also a way to highlight best practices, encourage friendly competition, and ultimately share examples from across the country about how states can improve. While this is the 15th annual release of the report, we did make some changes that I will talk about in the next slide. So what's new for the 2022 State Scorecard? We really restructured the scorecard to provide greater focus on major themes that we thought were missing from past reports. And what this meant was expanding our scoring categories to kind of accomplish two things. The first is to consider opportunities to align efficiency with state climate efforts, including ways that efficiency can better support state efforts to prioritize beneficial electrification. And the second was a concerted expansion of metrics to focus on equity. And so that included metrics that track state policies promoting equitable access to and benefits from clean energy and efficiency investment, which is an urgency that has been further highlighted by everything that Edward mentioned at the beginning: rising energy costs and affordability, and even lingering results of the pandemic. And I want to mention that we developed these equity metrics as part of ACEEE's Leading with Equity initiative. The initiative convened community-based organizations, advocates, utilities, and energy efficiency program implementers to identify these metrics and develop them, not only for ACEEE state scorecard, but also our city and utility scorecards. We also added a new chapter, a mini chapter on industrial energy efficiency to reflect the industrial sector's large potential to deliver greenhouse gas emissions reductions. And with that, let's get right into the results. So here is our map, our 22 map of scorecard rankings. These are based on over 40 different scoring metrics addressing policies covering utilities, transportation, buildings, industry now, and appliances. And the ranks are separated by 5 different tiers. As you can see, with the darkest blue depicts the top 10 states. And California was our top state this year, just like in 2020. And I'm looking forward to Commissioner Sharma's talk later. So California topped the state rankings again this year, thanks to a strong and wide-reaching set of energy-saving programs that extend across the utilities, buildings, and transportation sectors, and which the state really continues to strengthen these in pursuit of its goals to achieve carbon neutrality by 2045. The state has also adopted policies and programs to advance an equitable clean energy transition that's inclusive of all customers. And so for California, this looks like efforts that have included support for healthy homes and low-income weatherization, electric vehicle infrastructure, and clean transportation investments in disadvantaged communities, as well as efforts to improve program tracking metrics to expand benefits and participation among historically marginalized communities. Rounding out the top 5 were Massachusetts in 2nd place, New York in 3rd, Vermont 4th, and Maine 5th. And on Maine, we will hear more about Maine later on this call. Maine is the most improved state in the scorecard. It moved up 11 spots to rank number 5 now. And Maine gained points for adopting appliance standards last year, having an increased focus on low-income energy efficiency programs and weatherization, incentivizing energy efficient fuel switching, and requiring new affordable housing and other projects funded by the state's housing authority to be all electric. So a lot of great efforts. I also wanted to highlight some regional leaders as well. These include California in the West, and then Massachusetts in the Northeast, which has always been a leader and ranked 2nd overall this year, and continues to also lead in policies like efficient building energy codes, promoting electric vehicles, as well as efforts to integrate efficiency with state electrification and decarbonization strategies. Virginia led the South again this year, and Colorado led the Southwest/Mountain region. Virginia has taken important steps in recent years to ramp up energy efficiency programs through the Virginia Clean Economy Act and its participation in RGGI, or the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. Colorado has enacted a raft of clean energy legislation in recent years to accelerate statewide building decarbonization and electrification, and to really slash emissions from natural gas use. Minnesota led the Midwest, driven by an ambitious suite of energy efficiency policies and actions, also including efforts to strengthen utility programs and enable building electrification. And I'm looking forward to hearing Audrey talk about that later on. So what are some key findings? This graph here shows you utility sector electricity savings. And overall, nationally, we saw these savings from efficiency programs in the utility sector remain fairly level at around 26 million megawatt hours. This equates to roughly enough electricity to power 2.4 million homes a year. But national savings were down slightly compared to 2020. Well, although they were down slightly, state level changes in savings kind of varied considerably. I'll also mention that 26 states and the District of Columbia have an Energy Efficiency Resource Standard, or EERS, and these are policies establishing specific energy savings targets, and utilities and program administrators must meet through customer energy efficiency programs. Some more key findings. On equity, a small but growing number of states are making progress towards this. I think leading states are really understanding the importance of all customers being included in the clean energy transition. So states and utilities are starting to track equity-focused data to maximize program participation and benefits. States are also committed to strengthening engagement with marginalized communities through advisory councils or working groups. And states are also setting goals to reduce energy burden or increase energy affordability and creating a plan to track progress. But I would be remiss to mention that 34 states scored less than half the points available for equity-related metrics across all policy areas, showing that there's still a lot of room for improvement. On the building side, we continue to see states move to adopt stronger building energy codes, and then to address existing buildings, or rather energy use and emissions from existing buildings. Some states are adopting a building performance standard. So 3 states, Washington, Colorado, and Maryland, plus DC, have passed building performance standard legislation. Maryland was the most recent state to adopt this. We also saw more states embracing stronger clean car rules, which are modeled off of California's vehicle emission standards and zero emission vehicle program. I do want to mention that while vehicle electrification is important, we also need to be seeing states improve the overall efficiency of transportation systems through offering better public transit options and building infrastructure to support that. This year was also successful for state appliance standards. Maryland, New Jersey, Oregon, and Washington have passed efficiency standards, and New York is expected to adopt appliance standards through a rulemaking process by the end of the year. And these standards are really critical to helping consumers save on utility bills and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And then finally, just to wrap up with a selection of key state strategies for energy efficiency that we highlight in the report. The first is to establish a strong multi-year energy efficiency resource standard to really encourage utility savings investment, as more than half of states have now done, and also coupling these with performance incentives to further motivate investment. In the transportation sector, adopting stringent tailpipe emission standards, as well as standards and incentives for zero emissions and electric vehicles, and also improving the overall efficiency of transportation systems, as I had said in the earlier slide. On equity, overall ensuring that energy efficiency and clean energy investments are inclusive and that benefits accrue to all communities, especially those that are overburdened with high energy costs or have been historically underserved. In the building sector, policies like updating building energy codes and taking steps to ensure compliance through periodic studies and supporting code training for builders and code officials, as well as adopting a building performance standard. Last but not least, adopting cost-effective efficiency standards for appliances, equipment, lighting, and plumbing products. And that is the end of my presentation. So thank you very much for your time. And I'm going to pass it back to Edward to introduce our other great speakers.
Great. Well, thank you, Sagarika. Next, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Commissioner Genevieve Shiroma from California, which is the national leader in state energy efficiency in 2022. Commissioner Shiroma was appointed to the California Public Utility Commission by Governor Newsom in January 2019. And before joining the CPUC, Commissioner Shiroma served as a member of the Agricultural Labor Relations Board from 1999 to 2019. Previously, she was chief of the air quality branch at the California Air Resources Board from 1990 to 1999, an air quality supervisor from 1984 to 1990, and an air quality engineer from 1978 to 1984. For 5 terms, from 1999 to 2018, Commissioner Shiroma was the elected director of Ward 4 of the Sacramento Municipal Utility District. You all know it as SMUD. And she is presently the lead commissioner for approximately 65 formal proceedings spanning the regulated electricity, gas, telecom, transportation, and water industries. So Commissioner Shiroma, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Edward. Hello, everyone. Whether it's good morning, good afternoon, depending on your time zone, I really appreciate that. The American Council for Energy Efficient Economy is a nationwide, if not international, endeavor. California is very honored to receive your top ranking for the state's Energy Efficiency Scorecard. This inspires us to work harder and to do more. I'd like to acknowledge that accomplishing these statewide efforts to increase energy efficiency, decarbonization, and equity has been a truly collaborative effort with Governor Newsom, our California legislature, our sister agencies, the California Energy Commission, the California Air Resources Board, and within the California Public Utilities Commission's very hardworking teams. We've worked across all of these agencies and teams to establish strong and effective energy saving programs for our utilities, for buildings, for our transportation sectors. We are taking very seriously our commitment to carbon neutrality by 2045 with very strong milestones in between. In this past legislative year, the governor worked to establish even stronger programs to allot many millions of dollars towards electrification, for transportation, for major steps to achieve that carbon neutrality. Equity is near and dear to me. I started out life as a farm worker daughter when I was born back in the 1950s. My parents were a farm worker family, and they were living in a barn. We did have electricity. There was a propane stove and outdoor plumbing. I experienced the disadvantages of growing up very poor in poverty, but also the opportunities that were provided by the community, by the state. And I'm here before you to show the success of all those investments. The Commission has prioritized equity throughout our work. We recognize that in California, we have many vulnerable populations who are eager to participate and adopt measures that can help us reach our greenhouse gas goals. And so we recognize that we needed to find opportunities, partners, and education and information to provide for that participation through our disadvantaged communities advisory group that advises both the Energy Commission and ourselves. We are able to convene to ensure that disadvantaged communities, including tribal and rural communities, can give us input on what are the kinds of programs that we should develop. How should we be communicating? How should we assure seats at the table to provide for effective programs? I think that is very, very important. It's one thing for a state agency to go into a community and say, hey, we've got rebates, we've got programs, we think we know what you need. It's another thing to have members of the communities actually advising us on what is going to work or not work. We have also adopted a very aggressive environmental social justice action plan. We just updated that action plan. There are 9 goals that are designed that as we go through our proceedings, whether it's energy efficiency, whether it is our resource adequacy program, whether it's integrated resource, planning ahead for our grid, for decarbonizing, that we look at that through the lens of, are we lifting the least amongst us? Are we adding to the economy? Are we providing for pathways for good jobs? And in and around that, we've had a long-standing program for energy savings assistance for our income qualified customers. There is the discount program for the energy bills for individuals and families. And then the energy savings assistance, which is our weatherization and energy efficiency program, which is free of charge to customers who are at 200% of poverty. And this past year, that was increased to 250% of federal poverty. It's a new requirement, a new program, new access for families who may need help, and also for a means to contribute to helping us reach our greenhouse gas goals. One of the things that we have done in that program is to look at crafting pilots for the investor-owned utilities to look at deeper treatments of home, particularly in the high wildfire zones, to not only provide for energy efficiencies, but also there is the aspect of health, safety, and comfort. And in terms of safety, are there other things that we can do to invest in hardening homes for surviving a potentially wildfire situation? Our energy efficiency program is coupled with the Energy Commission in terms of we pushed out programs for whether it's weatherization, lighting, appliances, and financing for those programs. And then as those become hardened into our system, the Energy Commission adopts codes to make those a mainstream effort across California. And so we have really worked to look at not relying entirely on cost effectiveness, but the contribution to the entire system as far as contribution to our greenhouse gas footprint, the societal benefits, along with looking at of course, the costs and the benefits that the customers are paying into the system. I'll end with saying that California has experienced some very extreme temperature events. This past September was a major one. We managed to get through that event through energy efficiency, through customers using their thermostats to dial back their air conditioning. There were programs for providing for financial benefits to customers. And in our equity rubric, in terms of the customers who are in our disadvantaged communities, our low-income communities, they also were contributing through the investments that we have made, through smart thermostats, through the financial incentives that we have structured here in California. Thank you so much for the opportunity to highlight some of these programs. I look forward to the questions later and to hearing the other states' presentations. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Commissioner Shiroma. We'll move to the next speaker. This is Dan Burgess from Maine, which is the most improved state in this year's scorecard. And Dan was appointed as the director of the Maine Governor's Energy Office by Governor Janet Mills in March of 2019. And prior to his return to his home state of Maine, Dan spent 8 years working in leadership roles at the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources and the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. He has a business degree from the University of Maine and a master's in public administration from Northeastern University. Dan serves on the boards of the Efficiency Maine Trust and the National Association of State Energy Officials. Dan, take it away.
Thank you, Edward, and thank you to ACEEE for hosting today and for the recognition. And I really want to recognize the other states that are both on this panel, but those that are not, as a lot of work happens in this space, and we share best practices and engagement on that. And want to particularly those in the Northeast. So we'll just really briefly highlight the progress here in Maine, and then I'm looking forward to the questions. I think I'll start out by saying that, the importance of energy efficiency could not be more clear to me today, given the global events which are driving volatility in energy markets and are impacting Maine residents and businesses. And I think energy efficiency is a vital tool to available to states and to those looking to make improvements. Here in Maine, we are not immune to those and have not been. Governor Mills, since coming into office in 2019, has prioritized energy efficiency from the beginning. And I do want to recognize, obviously, her leadership, but also really the bipartisan spirit that our legislature has worked in over the last at least 4 years. And recognize the work of local governments, of nonprofits, of the private sector, and of industry, and really advancing energy efficiency here in the state of Maine. So Governor Mills enacted, with support of the legislature, requirements for greenhouse gas reductions by 2030 and 2050. She set, and the legislature codified, a 2045 carbon neutrality goal for the state. And then we also have a 80% by 2030 renewable portfolio standard. So we've been hard at work across state government and with partners across Maine, and working on how to achieve those targets. And one of the ways that we've been organizing ourselves is with the Maine Climate Council, which is just celebrated its second year of progress since the initial report was launched, and going to talk about some of those results getting into it. I think those results and what we're talking about today could not be possible without organizations like the Efficiency Maine Trust, our third-party energy efficiency administrator. A lot of the programming, a lot of the hard work and policy engagement and work comes from the staff and leadership and the board at the Efficiency Maine Trust, and they've been active here and doing great work in Maine for more than a decade, and we're seeing those results now. Also want to highlight Maine Housing, the administrator of some of our low-income programming, the WAP Fund, LIHEAP, CHIP, and ESIP programs. Those are really critical to Maine people, and countless others. So as we think about kind of the targets that we've set, majority of our state emissions and kind of really energy costs are coming from the building and transportation side, where almost half of the emissions come from the transportation sector and about 30% from the building sector. And so energy efficiency can help us both reduce emissions, but again, reduce costs and the volatility of those costs. And so on weatherization, we have targets to double the pace by 2025 and achieve 35,000 homes weatherized by 2030. We are on our way to achieving those, and have, working with those partners, prioritized low-income dwellings, with close to a quarter of those weatherization projects over the last few years going to low-income dwellings. On heat pumps, the governor set a goal and the legislature codified a goal of 100,000 new heat pumps installed by 2025. Maine has, roughly 550,000 households, has had a robust heat pump program that we've since doubled down on, and we're seeing really record results. Over the last 2 years or the last 3 years, we've installed over 80,000 heat pumps in the state of Maine. Almost 30,000 of those were within the last year, and we're seeing those installations all across the state. There are more than 1,000 qualified vendors through the Efficiency Maine Trust programs that are installing these heat pumps every day, and they are happening in every corner of the state. I want to note we're also seeing really good progress on heat pump hot water heaters, and again, that's in large part to Efficiency Maine Trust programs, both their kind of downstream programs or their programs throughout the space. It's been talked about today, but our Maine housing is requiring new public housing buildings that they are building to be EV and PV ready and to be electrified, and so we're excited to move that forward and to see the results from that. And just really broadly are continuing to learn from other states, work on policy that advances energy efficiency in the state of Maine. We appreciate the recognition. Again, want to recognize all of our partners in the state, all of the other states that are working hard on these issues, and look forward to the questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dan. Thank you so much for your comments. And last but not least, we have Audrey Partridge from Minnesota, which recently, in 2021, passed a landmark legislation called the ECO Act. Audrey has been with the Center for Energy and Environment since 2017, and she developed an advocate for SEE positions in matters before Minnesota's regulatory agencies and in other public forums. She works closely with experts within and outside of SEE to assist in setting the strategic direction of SEE policy advocacy. She previously worked on energy conservation policy and related regulatory topics at Centerpoint Energy, where she supported municipalities in Minnesota to achieve their energy efficiency, renewable energy, and sustainability goals. Audrey earned her bachelor's degree from Macalester College and a master's degree from the Humphrey School of Public Affairs at the University of Minnesota. Audrey, take it away.
Thank you. I'm going to take a minute here to share my slides. And if, let's see, I'm sorry, I'm trying to make it so that I can see you all. All right, is everyone able to see my slides? If you could give me just a thumbs up. Excellent. All right. Sorry, my screen here. All right, I think I've got it. See if it's advancing. Does that work? Excellent. I apologize for all the tech checks, but now it's working. We can jump right in. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Audrey Partridge. I'm the Director of Regulatory Policy with Center for Energy and Environment. Today, I'm here to talk to you all about Minnesota, which came in at number 10, as you saw on the scorecard. I'll touch on Minnesota's longstanding commitment to energy efficiency, our recent efficiency achievements, and then some exciting policy advancements in energy efficiency in the state. First, a little bit about CEE. CEE is a Minnesota-based clean energy nonprofit. Our core is all about energy efficiency. We employ about 160 people across a wide range of areas, and that includes efficiency program delivery and development, energy and technology research, community engagement and energy planning, workforce, building improvement financing, and clean energy policy advocacy. Much of our work is in Minnesota, but we also implement some programs in the Midwest and do a little work in the West as well. So now I'll start with the foundation of Minnesota's energy efficiency achievements, and that is our strong and longstanding policy framework. The first and oldest energy efficiency policy in Minnesota is, of course, our Utility Energy Efficiency Program statute that has long been called the Conservation Improvement Program, or CIP. This program has been around for nearly 40 years, and it sets out the requirements of our utility efficiency programs and annual savings goals. This program also includes a significant utility financial incentive based on a shared savings model and a low-cost cost recovery mechanism. So these aspects of the program, as well as just the longevity of this program, have made efficiency really a core part of our utilities businesses. Today, utilities in Minnesota not only see energy efficiency as an energy resource, but they often also cite it as a key customer engagement tool. The second big efficiency policy is our energy savings policy goal. Now, this is again looking back. In 2007, Minnesota enacted sweeping energy policy called the Next Generation Energy Act, which included a number of important energy policies that continue to guide our state today. Among them is the energy savings policy goal, which established cost-effective energy savings as the preferred energy resource source of the state of Minnesota. And it also set out an energy efficiency resource standard. Now, this law has been a very powerful tool for advocates and regulators to push for and approve high levels of investments in energy efficiency, both within utility efficiency plans and programs, and also within integrated resource planning proceedings. Now, quickly, I'll talk about Minnesota's recent efficiency achievements. First of all, Minnesota utilities run comprehensive efficiency programs for all their customer classes, and they are regularly recognized through ACEEE's Exemplary Program Awards. Unfortunately, I won't get a chance to dig into all those exciting programs, but I do want to recognize the Minnesota Department of Commerce and the Conservation Applied Research and Development Grant Program that the department runs here. This program provides research grants to identify new technologies and strategies to maximize energy savings and then improve conservation programs. This R&D program has been around for a long time, and it contributes substantially to many of Minnesota's efficiency programs. I want to highlight that as a best practice because it really drives continued excellence and innovation in our state. Now, briefly to our utility achievements. First, here you see the electric investor-owned utility energy savings achievements as a percent of sales. As you can see, our electric IOUs have achieved increasing levels of efficiency over the last year, and all of our electric IOUs saved over 2.5% of their sales, with Otter Power standing out as surpassing 4% of their sales. This resulted in over $317 million in net benefits to the utility system. Here, similarly, you'll see the natural gas investor-owned energy savings achievements as a percent of sales. As you can see, natural gas savings has been a little bit bumpier than electric savings. But last year, Minnesota natural gas utilities saved nearly 3.5 million decatherms, and that resulted in over $50 million in net benefits. Now, as Ed mentioned in his intro, 2021 was a very big year for energy efficiency in Minnesota. Looking back at our achievements, I think we expect to see bigger and greater things coming. The first of that is the Energy Conservation and Optimization Act. Passed in 2021, it now updates that original SIP or Conservation Improvement Program statute that I showed you earlier. So while SIP only included energy efficiency, ECO now removes a longstanding prohibition on fuel switching in our state and allows utility plans to include a mix of energy efficiency, efficient fuel switching, and load optimization within their ECO plans and programs. Additionally, ECO increased the annual energy savings requirement for electric investor-owned utilities, increased the required spending in low-income energy efficiency programs for both electric and natural gas utilities. And it now allows utilities to spend funds on what are called pre-weatherization measures for low-income customers. And those are health and safety upgrades that are necessary to make energy efficiency improvements. Minnesota utilities will file their first ECO plans in June of 2023, and those plans should go into effect in 2024. Now, alongside the ECO updates to our efficiency statute, we are also in the middle of a process to update our cost-effectiveness practices for that statute. This process was initiated and is led by the Department of Commerce. To date, we had used the traditional California tests, as our cost effectiveness tests for efficiency programs. We are now using the National Standard Practice Manual process to build a new primary cost effectiveness test and framework that reflects Minnesota's policy objectives and goals for our efficiency programs. Also in 2021, Minnesota enacted the Minnesota Efficient Technology Accelerator. This is a market transformation program designed to accelerate the deployment and reduce the costs of emerging, innovative, efficient technologies and approaches. This program will include a mix of strategic upstream initiatives with technology manufacturers to improve the performance and availability of products, as well as equipment installers and other key actors in the supply chain. CEE received approval to run this program, and we are already working with our utilities and project partners on initiatives for dual fuel air source heat pumps, high performance windows, and high performance rooftop units. And finally, last but definitely not least, is the Natural Gas Innovation Act, also passed in 2021. NGIA focuses specifically on emissions of our natural gas system, which have been increasing significantly in Minnesota over the last 15 years. It provides a regulatory path for natural gas utilities to invest in innovative resources. Among those are innovative energy efficiency investments and strategic electrification. This bill has an expansive cost-benefit framework and a strong focus on innovation. So we should see some really cutting-edge technologies and programming once utilities file their plans, which should begin mid-2023. And also a shout out and thank you to the Commission who oversees NGIA for all their great work in setting up the regulatory framework for that law. And that is all I have for you. Thank you so much, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you, Audrey. Thank you for the presentation. And now I'd like to bring all speakers back on video to take some questions from me and the audience. I'll just begin with Sagar, and I'll try to distribute all the questions equally to all of the panelists. Beginning with Sagarika, we have some questions related to metrics. So could you talk a little bit about the metrics that we use for the scorecard, just a general methodology, and at least maybe point to where they can find our detailed methodology for the metrics and where they can find all of the metrics themselves. And if you can add any information on how we calculate the state that is most improved.
Yeah, sure. Great question. All of this can be found in the report in terms of the specific metrics if folks are interested. But I think I had mentioned earlier that we did expand our list of metrics this year. So we added 16 new metrics, and 10 of those were focused on equity across all policy areas. In terms of the point allocation, in prior scorecard editions, we sort of allocated points to reflect the relative magnitude of energy savings possible. But moving forward, we are trying to align it more with how best practice energy efficiency policies that lead to maximum greenhouse gas reductions as well. And so right now, the utility sector in the scorecard accounts for most of the points, but transportation is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the US, and so that will be given even more weight in future editions. And again, we're going to be continuing to increase our point allocation and focus on equity, specifically refining those metrics and continuing to work with our partners with the Leading with Equity initiative. But yes, if you want a full list of those metrics, the report will be the best place to look at that.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And for Commissioner Shiroma, I wonder if you could just you've already touched on some of the programs and policies in California. I wonder if you might be able to elaborate on a couple of equity-centered policies or programs that you are particularly excited about or that you like to highlight, including things like intervenor compensation to enable greater community participation.
Oh gosh, yeah, I am pleased to say that there is so much going on in California. One of the programs that was just authorized through legislation, and we have started this effort. Community-based organizations are very important in that interface with equity communities, whether it's your United Way, your food banks, the Asian Resources, La Familia. I just call out a few of the organizations. There are many within California, and we've authorized a $30 million program. It is a pilot effort towards looking at funding for community-based organizations to help with that interface on energy efficiency programs, on our energy savings assistance programs. We also have programs on battery storage, we've got efforts underway to look at the affordability of electric vehicles, and just really to understand, what does it mean to have a smart thermostat in your home? What does it mean to have a smart appliance in your home? So that's one that is underway. In our energy efficiency program, we have what I'm calling an equity bucket. It is actually an equity portion of the energy efficiency budget, where we are authorizing our investor-owned utilities and also the regional energy networks that are all across the state of California, the Bay Area, Southern California, the Inland Empire. These RENs are partners in energy efficiency, and the RENs in particular don't have to achieve a cost effectiveness metric. This is a newish program towards, again, going into disadvantaged communities, low-income communities, see if there are energy efficiency opportunities for the customers, and I'm very excited about that. It is a new program. Thank you, Edward.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Dan, we have a couple of questions from the listeners. Just thinking about challenges, just general challenges related to the heat pump adoption. So what challenges do you see regarding heat pump adoption, and how will you be preparing to handle those challenges? And they can address from the topic of like the winter peak loads and how to handle that, to some of the supply line challenges, like the distribution of equipment. Could you address that?
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question. I think it's something that we're working on closely here as we look at where our efficiency programs are headed and what we need to do to meet both our targets and how to get to and reach Maine people and businesses. And I think from a overall challenge or area that we're working on, I think workforce is up there. I think that we have particularly coming out of the pandemic and looking at how to support businesses with resources and people, potential job seekers, to see this as a place where they can go. We've just this past week announced about $2.5 million through our Clean Energy Partnership, which is our workforce and innovation initiative, working with 9 different institutions across Maine, looking at how do we increase that workforce. And so we're excited to see that move forward. I think from a technology or that perspective, I think we're all watching closely the supply chain challenges and what the impacts are to meeting our targets. I'd also say that we're also looking at how are these systems being used in homes? How are we, if we're adding one heat pump, what does the second look like? And do we make sure that, how are we communicating that with people that are using them? And so I think it's an iterative process and something that we're looking at. We're all of our modeling for the Climate Council and our renewable energy targets does look at the peaking or the overall load growth and peaking opportunity, and how do we manage that, right? How can we, from a systems perspective, manage that load so that we're not having to overbuild the system more than needed? And so those are all things through the Climate Council, through other state working groups, and really looking at what our other states are doing and comparing notes. It's a great question.
Yeah, thank you for that, Dan. I have a question for Audrey. So in the EcoAct Venn diagram, which is a great diagram that you showed us, what policies or programs would get at that center where those three components of load optimization, efficiency, and fuel switching would all converge and address?
Great question. So we will see what the utilities ultimately file in June, and hopefully they come up with some creative ideas. But the general idea there is that prior to this eco statute update, we really had to run things in silos. And so now we have this opportunity, at least in the actual implementation of programs, to combine lots of different types of measures and activities that provide greater benefit to the customer and greater benefit to the utility system. So you might see things like a direct install program that will put in a smart thermostat that both saves energy, but also helps you shift your energy as well. Maybe you would also at that time sign up for a time of use rate to go with it in order to help encourage that energy shifting. And then perhaps you would get the opportunity to install an air source heat pump that would interact, offset at least some of your natural gas use, and interact with your smart thermostat and the controls on the switchover temp and switchover point there. So I think we'll see hopefully some creative ideas, but really just looking for opportunities for utilities to offer all of the above to customers at once.
Okay, great. Thank you. So Sagarika, if I can just toss a question about all the new federal funding, how they may factor into the scorecard analysis.
That's a great question, Edward. So this is sort of outside the scope of our report. This is a state scorecard report, but we certainly recognize that it's just an unprecedented level of funding for states to invest in clean energy and energy efficiency. And so in future editions, I think we will very much consider how states are using this federal funding. It's a really incredible opportunity to really implement and adopt all of the strategies and the policies that we're promoting towards energy efficiency and to do so equitably. So right now we don't look at that in the state scorecard, but I think it's a very big consideration. And I'm curious from our other speakers how they see that playing in, and I'm sure that's a big topic of conversation as well.
Yeah. And Commissioner Sharma, I have a sort of a quick follow-up question from a listener on the weatherization assistance eligibility threshold of 250% of federal poverty line. The clarifying question was, is that threshold, is that additional 50% being paid by California?
The simple answer is yes. And okay, we have a rough estimate that by going to 250% of poverty, that increases the eligible households by about 8%. Okay. Now, the legislation did not authorize new monies. Right. The program is funded through a surcharge on energy customers. I think it's a long-standing viewpoint in California that we customers are willing to pay a little more to help customers in need. Now, the budget that we adopted, it's a 5-year budget. We're in the second year of the budget. It's going to sound like a lot. It's $2.2 billion, and it is. It is. In California, we do have a large population. So what we've tasked the investor-owned utilities to do is to look at how in the new year, particularly, how to fold in these new customers who are eligible, whether any of them might qualify for the pilot program that I mentioned earlier, and to see if within the existing budget, these customers can be accommodated.
Okay, great. Thank you. Then would you like to I want to just sort of give you a choice, either sort of weigh in on the question that I asked Sagarika about how the new federal funding, how that changes the picture for you in terms of what you are able to do. And if you want to just sort of overachieve and answer another question about, the nexus between the equitable housing policy and efficient all-electric buildings, which is a policy that's been recognized in our scorecard for Maine.
I appreciate the choose your own adventure. That's great. Thank you. I think we are spending a lot of time in our office across the state and with other states on the unprecedented opportunity that I think the IRA offers and states, both through the homes and the HERA provisions and others, right? And so I think we see that as a really exciting time to be in a place where we have made progress through Efficiency Maine Trust and others on achieving our targets, have begun to transform certain market segments, but also are looking ahead to the challenges, whether it's income verification or to the workforce issues that I talked about, and how we achieve those together. Well, ultimately, I think providing clarity both to our residents and businesses about what does it mean for them? What do the tax incentives mean? How do we ensure that there's not confusion about future rebates versus other programs? And so we're excited about it. I see a big opportunity to, whether it's braid or layer or stack, kind of put these together to help achieve, I think, some transformational impacts, particularly in those disadvantaged communities that the IRA requires. And I'll just say this: we're looking at all of this work. It really is incumbent to make sure that we're designing our programs and thinking about our programs from the start with those communities in mind, and not afterwards. And through whether it's communications, metrics, program designs, it's something that we're thinking about early, particularly with IRA funding as it requires.
Yeah, great. And Audrey, if I could ask you a question about this one super performer, what appears to be a super performer, Otter tail power, showing that they're doing electric savings over 4%. So, I mean, are there lessons that others could take from OTP? I mean, we would love, all of our utilities to be saving at that rate.
Yeah, great question. So first, I want to say thank you to Dan and Commissioner Shroma. I think that I like what you said, Dan, about stacking, layering, and braiding. And I think we in Minnesota hope to figure that out as well, and look forward to learning from both of your states too. am excited to highlight Otter tail power. So Otter tail power is a super achiever. They are our smallest investor-owned electric utility in Minnesota. Their territory is in the sort of north and west part of the state. And I had to ask one of my colleagues for some more details about this, because I too was really blown away. So first of all, they have a great staff. Jason Grenier runs their staff. They're very high achievers. They have a territory with very little natural gas service. So they have some extra load compared to other territories in Minnesota, where we have really most of our communities, especially our larger communities, have natural gas service. So the other electric utilities just don't have that high heating load that they can go after. But the other big story there is that Otter tail power serves a number of communities, but the average size of those are 600 people per city or per municipality. So the Otter tail power staff have really taken a community-based approach. They work very hard to establish relationships with businesses in those communities and embed themselves in those rural communities to become a resource. And that's really what enables them to achieve those high savings.
Wow. But that's really great. I really love to learn how they're able to do this. Commissioner Shroma, if I just, in the last minute or so, if I can just sort of ask a data nerd question, which is that, having access to utility data can really help inform the design of programs and policies, but many states struggle with obtaining access to that kind of utility data. So what might you advise to these states about, designing utility data access policies and implementing them?
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, we're very fortunate in California, where our statutory construction gives us access to utility data. We have a very robust effort of determining what is publicly available, what is trade secret, and to distinguish between that. And we also have a non-disclosure agreement tool, so that so our staff has very good access, excellent access to data, in order to be able to design, help work with the utilities, third-party administrators to design programs. But then we also have crafted a feature to give local governments access to utility data, and also our regulated water utilities as well, which play a big role in energy efficiency. And so with local government, again, working with the utilities in terms of what information can be accessed by local government, and also whether or not there needs to be a non-disclosure agreement, so that our regional energy networks, the local, the Bay RENs, the SoCal RENs, the Inland Empire, so forth, rural RENs, that they can design their programs effectively. So it's helpful to have that statutory construction in other states, but meanwhile, have the tools available.
Great, thank you. So I think we're at time. So thank you all for joining us for today's webinar. Everyone will be sent a link to the on-demand recording as well as the slides that were presented today within the next few business days. And we hope you'll join us for a future webinar. And I want to say that many of you have really great questions that we weren't able to get to. And we will go through the questions and try to answer them separately where that's possible. So again, thank you again and have a great day.